Man is shocked and cries upon seeing the necklace of his new caregiver that his wife hired. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. Emily had been searching tirelessly for a job for the past week. Her financial situation was dire, and she knew she couldn't afford to be picky. She was determined to find a way out of the poverty trap that threatened to pull her into despair. The thought of ending up homeless and begging on the streets was a nightmare that she refused to let become her reality. At 23, Emily had faced more challenges than many people her age. Half a year ago, she had been working as a cashier at a small electronics shop. The store's owner and the manager conspired to pin a significant financial shortfall on her, accusing her of stealing and negligence. They claimed that a large batch of merchandise had gone missing during her shift, a claim that was impossible for anyone who knew Emily. Naive and trusting, she was slow to realize that she had been set up by the very people who were supposed to guide and protect her. The owner didn't care about justice. He saw an opportunity to gain free labor by forcing Emily to work off a debt that wasn't real. Despite knowing she was innocent, Emily returned the supposed missing amount, but the cost to her was steep. To make the payment, she not only worked grueling double shifts for months, but also sold her late mother's crumbling old house, the only place she had ever called home. The sale left her with just enough to clear the debt, but she had to move into a cramped apartment she could barely afford. On top of that, she had to find the strength to kick out her stepfather, a chronic alcoholic who had contributed nothing but chaos to her life. Having settled her obligations, Emily vowed to be more careful in her future job choices. Scanning through job listings in the local paper, she deliberately avoided anything that involved handling money. She was on the verge of accepting a cleaning job when a different advertisement caught her attention. Caregiver needed. No prior experience required, but basic medical skills preferred. Intrigued, Emily read the ad aloud. Without overthinking it, she decided to apply, motivated by the possibility of finally landing a stable job. Her decision was influenced by more than just desperation. She had experience with basic medical tasks thanks to her late mother, who had been a nurse. Her mother, Grace, had worked in a surgical ward and had taught Emily how to perform basic medical procedures, hoping to pass on her knowledge. Grace had passed away 3 years earlier, leaving behind a legacy of kindness and skills that Emily never thought she would need. In her younger years, Emily had questioned why her mother insisted on teaching her things like how to take blood pressure, administer injections, and set up for lines. Back then, Emily was more interested in pursuing her own dreams than learning medical skills she assumed would never be relevant to her life. But now, as she looked at the job ad, she felt a surge of gratitude for the knowledge her mother had imparted. Emily dialed the number in the ad and quickly received more information about the position. The following day, she found herself standing outside a grand 2-story house located in one of the city's wealthiest neighborhoods. The neatly trimmed hedges, stylish patio, and pristine swimming pool seemed like they belonged to a different world, one Emily had only glimpsed on TV. Nervously clutching the pendant her mother had given her years ago, Emily tried to muster the courage to knock on the door. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open to reveal a woman who appeared to be in her early 40s. Dressed to perfection, with a flawless smile that seemed practiced, the woman barely acknowledged Emily's presence. "You must be the caregiver. You're exactly what I expected," the woman said with a tone of indifference, yawning slightly as if she couldn't be bothered. "I hope I'm suitable for the role," Emily replied, keeping her tone polite. "Oh, you'll do just fine. My husband isn't too demanding. Even if you don't know all the medical stuff, there's time for you to learn," the woman answered dismissively, taking Emily by surprise. The casual way in which she talked about her husband's care was unexpected, especially for someone who should be concerned about his well-being. Emily soon learned that the woman's name was Lydia Benson, and her husband was named Richard. Lydia's attitude was more like that of a tour guide than a concerned spouse. She walked Emily through the house with little enthusiasm before leading her to meet Richard, the person she'd be caring for. Richard looked up as they entered, a faint glimmer of curiosity in his eyes. "So you're Emily," he said warmly. "I hope you don't mind being stuck here with me," he added with a weak smile. Lydia snorted, clearly unimpressed by her husband's attempt at humor. "Well, if you don't behave, I might just leave you to handle him all on your own," she said with a smirk. Emily felt a pang of sympathy for Richard. It was obvious that Lydia had no genuine affection for her husband. Their relationship seemed more like a hollow arrangement than a partnership built on love. "I wonder how they ended up like this," Emily thought to herself. Lydia quickly outlined the duties Emily would have to perform before excusing herself to go lie down. It didn't take long for Emily to realize that Lydia's mornings were usually spent lounging in bed while someone else tended to her husband's needs. As Emily began working, she couldn't help but feel empathy for Richard, who turned out to be a remarkably intelligent and thoughtful man. Richard had once been a well-regarded scientist, known for his contributions to medical research. But a terrible car accident had shattered his career. The accident had occurred when Lydia was driving home after a night out. Distracted by an argument she was having with Richard, she lost control of the car, sending it skidding into a ditch. While Lydia emerged with minor injuries, Richard suffered severe spinal damage that left him confined to a wheelchair. The accident didn't just end his career. It drove an even deeper wedge between him and Lydia. Their relationship had already been rocky, but the accident made things unbearable. Few people knew that Lydia had never truly loved Richard. Their marriage had been more of a business arrangement. Lydia's wealthy parents had pushed her into it for status. Richard had fit the profile of the successful, well-established man they wanted for their daughter. However, Lydia's parents never fully accepted Richard, treating him more like an accessory than a partner. After the accident, Lydia resumed her social life as if nothing had changed, leaving Richard to deal with his new reality alone. There were rumors that she had been unfaithful long before the accident, and now she didn't even try to hide her disdain for him. Emily saw this firsthand when she overheard Lydia making snide remarks about Richard's condition. It made Emily's blood boil, but she knew she had no right to interfere. All she could do was offer Richard the best care possible. Over time, Emily and Richard grew close, developing a bond that went beyond caregiver and patient. Despite Lydia's neglect, Emily found herself spending more time with Richard, taking him outside for walks or simply keeping him company. With no children to support him, Richard came to rely on Emily as his primary source of comfort. One afternoon, while they were outside enjoying the sunshine, Emily bent down to straighten the blanket covering Richard's legs. As she did, her pendant slipped out of her blouse, catching Richard's attention. He stared at it for a long moment before his face went pale. "Where did you get that pendant?" he asked, his voice shaking. "It belonged to my mother. She passed away a few years ago. I wear it to keep her close," Emily replied gently. Richard's breathing became labored, and he clutched his chest in distress. "I've seen that pendant before. I gave one just like it to someone I cared about deeply a long time ago," he murmured, struggling to hold back tears. 20 years earlier, Richard had been involved in a passionate relationship with a nurse named Grace, Emily's mother. Grace had been a gentle, caring woman who stole Richard's heart, but their relationship was doomed from the start. Lydia's controlling parents had discovered the affair and used their influence to separate them, getting Grace transferred to another hospital while keeping Richard under tight supervision. Richard never knew that Grace was pregnant when they parted ways. Now, fate had brought him face to face with the daughter he never knew he had. Listening to Richard's confession, Emily felt a wave of emotions wash over her. "Mom never told me much about you, but I always wondered what you were like," she said softly, tears welling up in her eyes. For the first time in years, Richard felt a glimmer of hope. Discovering that he had a daughter gave him a reason to push back against Lydia's mistreatment. Armed with this new sense of purpose, Richard began asserting his rights. Sensing that her control was slipping, Lydia tried to fire Emily, but Richard refused to let it happen. Instead, he demanded a divorce and a fair share of the assets. Lydia was blindsided by the sudden turn of events. She had never expected Richard to stand up for himself, much less take legal action. But with the law on his side, Richard secured his freedom, and Lydia was forced to move back in with her parents, who were less than thrilled to have her back under their roof. Meanwhile, Richard and Emily began to rebuild their lives together. They stayed in the house that was rightfully theirs, creating new memories and finding happiness despite the hardships they had endured. Emily felt certain that her mother was watching over them, proud that they had finally found each other and forged a bond that nothing could break. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.